Hi, my name is Crystal, and this is going to be my project 2 about intertextuality and literature. The topics I will be talking about is summary of films and the novel, the intertextuality between the Frankenstein's films and novel, works cited, and conclusion. The thesis and the meaning of intertextuality is this presentation argues that the films Frankenstein 1931 and Young Frankenstein 1994 uses intellectual references to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or also known as the modern Prometheus, to reinterpret the creature story for different audiences, while the 1931 film transforms Shelley's philosophical narrative in a horror spectacle. Young Sheldon provides through the novel and the earlier film, demonstrating how intertextuality reshapes themes of scientific ambition, responsibility, and societal fear. Intertextuality typically refers to the relationship between texts and the ways they refer to and draw from one another to create meaning. I will be analyzing in this project using a lens analysis. Intertextuality is an aspect of literature that focuses on the concept that no text exists in isolation, but that all texts are interconnected to a complex web of references, allusions, and inspiration drawn from one another. Intertextuality occurs when a text reference or builds meaning from earlier works. Artists often use these references to reinforce themes, reinterpret early ideas, or comment on cultural traditions. This is an introduction to Mary Shelley's The Modern Prometheus. In Frankenstein by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, Volume 1-3, Letter 1 of Frankenstein starts with Robert Walton riding from Pittsburgh to his sister Margaret, telling his journey to the North Pole to discover a northern passage and scientific wonders. Robert Walton tells his sister about his intense loneliness and desperate for a need for a friend. Letter 3 is about Captain Robert Walton briefly writes to his sister Margaret Sylvie to share that his voyage to the North Pole is proceeding successfully. Letter 4 talks about how Robert's ship is trapped in ice and his crew spots a giant figure, being Frankenstein. One of the strongest examples of intertextuality occurs when the creature reads Paradise Lost by John Milton. The creature compares himself to both Adam and Satan from Milton's poem. Like Adam, he is a created being who asks why he was brought into existence. Like Satan, he feels rejected and becomes angry at his creator. The creature says he should have been Adam, but feels more like Satan because his victor abandoned him. But we'll get more to that on the next couple slides. This is a summary of Young Frankenstein and Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein is about an American neurosurgeon who inherits his famous grandfather's hotel like estate. Dr. Frederick Frankenstein, wanting to prove that his ancestor wasn't just misunderstood, he repeats old experiments, creating the monster Frankenstein with the help of his assistant Igor and Ingna. Frankenstein is about a scientist who is obsessed with the idea of using electricity to bring a monster to life. He digs up corpses with his assistants to assemble a living being with the body parts and uses electricity to bring it to life. And this is the intertextuality between Young Frankenstein and Frankenstein, Young Frankenstein and the modern Prometheus, Frankenstein and the modern Prometheus. The first intertextuality is the creation of the creature. In a novel, Victor brings the creature to life using scientific experimentation. And 2, the creature's rejection by his creator. 3, the creature and the little girl, as you can see. you can see from the quotes and what I've cited, and it shows intertextually in Mary Shelley's novel Victor Frankenstein's creation of the creature is described in a vague and unsettling way, focusing more on Victor's psychological reaction than on the scientific process itself. The 1931 film adaptation transformed this moment into a dramatic laboratory scene with the lighting, machines, and electricity. And then for the second one, this shows an intertextuality. In the novel, Victor Frankenstein immediately abandons the creature after bringing it to life because he is horrified by its appearance. This moment establishes one of the novel's central themes, the creator's responsibility for his creation. The 1931 film keeps this idea but exaggerates the horror of the moment, showing Frankenstein and his sister recoiling dramatically when the monster moves. And then in the third part, it says the intertextuality explanation by changing the scene from the creature saving a child to accidentally killing her. The 1931 film emphasizes horror rather than sympathy. This alters Shelley's original message and transformed the creature from a misunderstood being to a dangerous monster, reflecting the film's focus on fear and spectacle rather than philosophical reflection. This is the intertextuality between the modern parenthesis and young Frankenstein. The first connection is the scientific ambition to create life. In the novel, Victor becomes obsessed with discovering the secret of life. For example, learn from me how dangerous of the acquirement of knowledge, Shelley says. And then in the film, Frederick Frankenstein initially rejects his grandfather's work, but later becomes obsessed with completing the experiment. This shows that intertextuality between them. Victor becomes obsessed with discovering the secret of life, ignoring the ethical consequences of his work. Young Frankenstein referenced this idea but transformed it into priority. At first, Frederick Frankenstein tries to distance himself from his grandfather's experiments, but eventually he becomes fascinated by the same scientific challenge. And then for the blind man scene, or the second intertextuality example, is the novel states that the creature approaches the blind D. Lacey, hoping he will not be judged by his appearance. I am blind and cannot judge of your countenance. The film states the monster meets a blind hermit played by Gene Hackman, who accidentally burns and injures him while trying to help. In Shelley's novel, the creature approaches the blind D. Lacey because he hopes that someone who cannot see his appearance will judge him based off his words and characters. This scene emphasizes the novel's theme that the society often rejects individuals based on superficial differences. Young Frankenstein referenced this moment through the scene with blind hermit, but it transformed the emotional interaction into comedy when the hermit accidentally injures the monster while trying to help him. And for the third example of intertextuality is in the novel, the creature secretly observes the D. Lancey family to learn language. I learned and applied the words fire, milk, and bread. In the film, Frederick teaches the monster to speak and socialize before presenting him to society. In Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the creature learns language by secretly observing the family and gradually understanding words, emotions, and human relationships. This process is important. It shows that the creature is not naturally evil, but capable of intelligence, empathy, and moral understanding. By learning language and social behavior through observation, the creature begins to learn himself as part of humanity in hopes that others will accept him. Shelley uses this moment to emphasize one of the novel's central themes, that society's rejection rather than the creature's nature contributes to the transformation into the tragic, angry figure. This is intertextuality between Frankenstein and young Frankenstein. The laboratory recreation, the abnormal brain, and the angry villagers with torches I won't be going over this whole slide because the presentation is getting a bit long. But this is my works cited page. And this is my conclusion. In conclusion, intertextuality allows later works to reinterpret earlier texts and reshape their meaning for new audiences. 1931 film Frankenstein adapts Mary Shelley's novel by emphasizing horror and spectacle, while Young Frankenstein humorously parodized through the novel and the earlier film. Through these references, each work preserves core themes of scientific ambition, responsibility, and social fear, while transforming them to fit new genres and audiences. Thank you for listening to me, and this is the end of my presentation.